When I first played through 3 houses, I picked the Blue Lions, and while I enjoyed the students in the house, I was still excited to recruit other students to my team. One student in particular caught my interest because of her, personality. And while I came for the JoJo hat, I kept using her because of her interesting personality. It becomes clear over the course of the game that she's a highly talented individual who will do whatever she can to overcome her low status in society. But while she can be shrewd and calculating, she's a deeply passionate person, but that passion ends up being challenged in her becoming disillusioned with the war and can end up clashing with her operatic ideals. One of Dorothea's most prominent traits is that she is kind and extroverted, as seen in her attempts to reach out to isolated students in the monastery to help them. This can be prominently seen in her support chain with Bernadetta, where Dorothea does her best to get closer to her, even though Bernadetta's anxiety makes it pretty difficult. Dorothea is patient enough to put Bernadetta at ease, and is able to understand why she is so nervous to become friends with her. While Dorothea is outraged by Count Varley's treatment of commoners, she still says that she'll be Bernadetta's friend no matter what. Dorothea is also exceedingly kind to Petra and their supports in her attempts to make Petra feel more comfortable while being in a foreign place. Dorothea initially tries to be nice to her by doing things for Petra, but eventually she learns that she can make Petra feel more comfortable simply by relating to her and being there for her, as shown in Dorothea's desire to braid her hair in the same way that Petra does in their A support. Dorothea also has some fun with Ingrid by trying to get her interested in dressing up and participating more in practices that are more typical of noblewomen in Fodlan. It doesn't really pan out.
Permission is not granted. Ever. Just back off.
But Dorothea does help Ingrid in their paralogue by saving her from being married off to someone awful, and goes as far as to gather evidence to annul the proposal. Dorothea also confesses her admiration to Manuela and their supports, which makes Manuela extremely happy, because she can finally be a role model for someone. Later, even though Manuela finds herself in compromising positions in front of Dorothea, she still respects and admires her despite those issues, showing just how accepting and understanding Dorothea can be. She also promises to go into a marriage pact because they're both scared of being left alone. Speaking of marriage pacts, Dorothea also comes to form one with Caspar. They both like each other well enough to get along, but they don't really have any romantic feelings for each other, so they end up agreeing to be together if they never find anybody else, indicating that they have a deep platonic love for each other. I mean, they must, considering all the simp-like behavior that Caspar does in their earlier supports.
Would you mind coming along to my room?
Your room? Okay. This isn't what I had in mind.
Dorothea is also a highly successful self-made individual, scraping by to take advantage of every opportunity that she can to move up the social hierarchy of Fodlan. It's impressive to consider just how far she got, going from an orphan in Enbar to becoming a key figure in the future of Fodlan. While Dorothea has a distaste for the shallowness of the hierarchy of nobility, she is shrewd enough to take advantage of it to succeed. In her C support with Byleth, she openly shares why she attempts to win over so many men at the Officers Academy, that reason being because she's worried about whether or not she'll be able to have security later in life once her beauty fades. She eventually reveals that while her attempts to seduce men for the shallowness isn't ideal, it's something that she feels compelled to do because of her fear for becoming impoverished again. However, in her A support with Byleth, she comes to clarify that what she really wants is to find someone who can appreciate her beyond her appearances. Now, even though she knows what she wants and how to get it, she's still bothered by the rumors that are spread about her because of her background. She almost envies the carefree way that Linhardt lives his life because he's so unbothered by all the stigmas of the world. But she soon realizes that she can't live how Linhardt does, because it's her difficult experiences that give her the strength to persist to where she is. Linhardt eventually comes to also realize that her way of dealing with stress is better than his, because no one can run away from their problems altogether, and he realizes that her addressing her issues head on is what made her into the strong woman that he admires so much. While being shrewd and pragmatic, Dorothea also has a lot of romantic sentimentality that informs her views on love, and the war. Her supports with Edelgard exemplify her romantic idealism that comes from the opera when she gets excited about Edelgard's ideals to revolutionize Fodlan, singing some songs about the changes that she might make in the world. Even though Dorothea can be strong-willed and shrewd, she also has a lot of romantic sentimentality that informs her views on love and the war. Her supports with Edelgard exemplify her romantic idealism that comes from the opera when she gets excited about Edelgard's ideals to revolutionize Fodlan, singing some songs about the changes that she might make in the world. An interesting development comes in their A support, where Dorothea tells Edelgard that she doesn't really worry about her love troubles when she's around her, which is probably a result of the freedom that Edelgard can offer Dorothea. With the destruction of the rigid noble crest system, Dorothea wouldn't have to worry anymore about becoming successful by chasing after nobles. In Edelgard's world, she can succeed off of her own merits entirely. Edelgard directly implies how important Dorothea is herself by telling Dorothea that she'll have to play herself in the opera. Dorothea's support chain with Hubert shows that she wishes that she could have had someone in her life who would give the same dedication to her as Hubert gives to
Lady Edelgard.
Eventually, Hubert's dedication is so intriguing to Dorothea that she wishes to marry him so that she can partake in Hubert's romantic dedication. Dorothea clearly has some lofty ideals that she wishes life would live up to, but sometimes society gets in the way of the realization of those ideals, such as in the case of the nobility. Dorothea hates the nobility, because their shallowness unnecessarily made her live in squalor because of her birth, yet would eventually shower her in accolades because of her appearances as an opera diva. In her support chain with Hanneman, Dorothea gets into what exactly caused her to view nobles in such a negative light. She describes how she's the bastard daughter of a noble and was unrecognized because she didn't bear a crest, leading to her living as an orphan in the streets of Enbar. Eventually, she came to meet a man who seemed to be her father, and he flirted with her after the show. She was infuriated because the very same man who tossed her away when she was a child for superficial reasons would end up valuing her for different superficial reasons later. Her father only viewed her to be valuable as long as she was useful to his image or his status, which she found particularly disgusting. Her hatred of noble superficiality is explicitly shown in her supports with the trifecta of nobility: Ferdinand, Lawrence, and Sylvain. In her first couple of supports with all three, she's very cold to them because of their respective sentimentalities on nobility. She thinks that Lawrence only cares about his image, that Ferdinand is judgmental of commoners, and that Sylvain is excessively shallow. Eventually, Dorothea begins to understand nobility better in her supports with Lawrence and Ferdinand. Dorothea ends up making Lawrence fall for her, causing him to lower his ridiculous noble standards. But it seems like she hasn't resolved her issues with nobility in that A support, but she does in her final support with Ferdinand. In their final support, she acknowledges that she hasn't fully moved past her distaste for nobility, but she'd like to try. It's a nice ending that brings her to acknowledge her prejudices against nobility, and Ferdinand allows her to see nobles as more human. Dorothea has difficulty reconciling her romantic idealism with her pragmatism about the world. This is readily apparent in her monastery dialogue during all the routes during the time skip, where she expresses serious doubts about the war, even if she believes in the romantic ideals of the cause. She wants a better world, but she's not sure if the death and suffering to reach that world is worth it. She does develop into being able to accept them in her supports with Yuri, Felix, and Sylvain. In her support with Yuri, she's initially highly enthusiastic about getting Yuri to sing on stage because of his natural talent, and while she eventually convinces him in their B support, it doesn't work out the way she thought it would. After the time skip, it's revealed that Dorothea lost her passion for singing because certain experiences tarnished it for her. But she realizes that she doesn't have to let it compromise her dreams, so she and Yuri resolve to create an ideal opera that doesn't worry about the pragmatic and superficial issues of Fodlan's nobility. In her support with Felix, Dorothea continues to hang around him because of how different he is from most of the nobility. Felix initially comes off as exceedingly rude to her, but they end up forming a genuine connection after Felix learns that she's a skilled training partner and is talented at singing. She finally finds someone who can appreciate her for her instead of some superficial qualities. Finally, in her ace support with Sylvain, Dorothea overcomes her initial distaste for him after he becomes somewhat vulnerable to her, admitting that, while they can both be shallow people, he's willing to love her regardless of her appearance and would still love her if she was an old granny. But then again, he didn't seem to have much of a problem with that before, in Ingrid's grandmother's case. But regardless, the sentiment still stands where Dorothea meets someone who had a similar issue forming genuine relationships and is able to mutually understand and appreciate each other, finding someone who can
And love a girl that used to be scared and alone on the streets of the capital.
Dorothea is a compelling character in her ability to show the duality of lofty romantic ideals and the realistic application of them. Whether it be through her love life or through her interpretation of the war, she provides an operatic dramaticism that can recontextualize some of the events within the Three Houses narrative, revealing just how messy life can be. If you liked the video, be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. It really helps. Huh. Looks like the shilling paid off.